Have you ever wondered why we call white people Caucasian?
Not really, to be quite honest, fam, but I know you're gonna tell me.
The answer is surprisingly, heck, you know what this show is about.
Promoting racism against white people?
Most people know the definition of Caucasian as a white-skinned person of European descent. Right? Not really. Outside of America, white people generally aren't seen as Caucasian at all. Why? Because almost every country has a different definition for Caucasian.
Surely you can share some with us then.
A person from the Caucasus region, which in case you're wondering is actually right over here.
Oh, so no other definitions then, just one that suits the narrative you're about to weave.
With parts of Russia, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and northern Turkey. So why has Caucasian become synonymous with all white people? Well, buckle your seatbelts because things are about to get pretty racist.
Yes, Francesca, let it all out. Let the racism flow.
A century before Hitler's rise to power.
If you're talking about a century before Hitler's rise to power, then why mention Hitler at all? Except maybe to remind us that Hitler was a white person.
There was another German man who believed white people were the perfect race.
Hitler didn't believe that. He believed that Aryans were the perfect race, and even there he was willing to make some exceptions.
Christoph Meiners, who was one of the earliest adopters of scientific racism. Now hold on, because it's about to get really unscientific.
Well, we are watching MTV Decoded, so...
Meiners believed that Caucasians, aka the actual people from that region between Russia and Turkey, had, quote, the whitest, most blooming and most delicate skin.
Did you know that?
That's what Francesca Ramsey thinks German people sound like?
Now you know!
In fact, he viewed every non-Caucasian race as ugly, inferior, immoral, and animal-like. He also believed people from the Middle East and Asia had little intelligence and were predispositioned to be evil.
Yeah, guy sounds like a real dick.
Then German scientist Johann Blumenbach added to this emerging definition.
Oh, those Germans.
Blumenbach believed that the Caucasus region was home to the most beautiful race of men, the people of Georgia.
Sounds like that was just his opinion.
And what made the Georgian people so beautiful? Well, this creepy guy had a huge collection of human skulls.
Having trouble hearing you, so take your time.
Creepy ass cracker.
And out of the 245, the Georgian skull was his favorite. Did I mention that he had a collection of
245 human skulls?
Well, you did say he was a scientist, so is it really that surprising that he would have a collection of bones, including skulls, to study?
So this weirdo, using no science at all, decided that all of humanity must have come from this region.
Yeah, a lot of bad science was done in the 1700s. You're talking about a time period in which it was commonly believed that California was an island separate from the rest of North America. They didn't have modern geography or genetics yet, so pretty much anyone commenting on either of these subjects, especially in relation to each other, was going to be wildly inaccurate.
He also decided that all light-skinned people from Europe belonged to the same race, Caucasian. Then he split the rest of the world into 4 other races, which he referred to as degenerate forms of God's original creation. Sounds like a fun guy.
At least he has the excuse of having been racist in the 1700s as opposed to you who's still racist in the current year!
Those other races were Mongolian, the yellow race, Malayan, the brown race, Ethiopian, the black race, and American, the red race.
Well, it's certainly more complicated than that, but modern genetic analysis of human DNA has identified distinct genetic backgrounds corresponding with geographical location, and as you can see, much of Europe is covered by the same few genetic haplogroups. Groups which share more similarity to each other than they do to other genetic groups outside of that region.
Blumenbach's racial classifications went on to be adopted by the newly formed United States, because of course it did.
Haha, yeah, fuck America, right?
It helped our founding fathers justify things like slavery and selective immigration quotas.
So now you're equating selective immigration quotas with slavery, even though modern countries such as Israel, Japan, and Australia still use selective immigration quotas today. as is their right to do so as sovereign nations.
But that was a long time ago, right? So why does the word Caucasian persist while other old-timey racial categories like Mongoloid and Negroid have disappeared?
Those terms haven't completely disappeared, they're just not as commonly used because someone like you might get offended.
Well, there seems to be a few reasons that are a little intertwined. In America, there's a long legal history of the word. The Supreme Court has actually used Caucasian in 64 cases, including one from 1928 that is key. During the 1920s, only free whites, or Caucasians, were allowed to become naturalized citizens. In 1928, Bhagat Singh Thind, an Indian man who fought for the US in World War I, tried to become a US citizen by arguing that many anthropologists defined Indians as Caucasians. After a major legal battle, the Supreme Court decided that Caucasian really only meant white Europeans. This decision legally codified the modern American definition of Caucasian as whites with European ancestry.
I know from personal experience that this isn't true because my dad is an Egyptian immigrant to the United States, born and raised in Egypt, and as far as the US government is concerned, he's Caucasian by legal definition. But don't just take it on my personal experience, here's a current legal definition of the word Caucasian. In the USA, Canada, and Australia, Caucasian is commonly used to refer to light-complexioned people indigenous to or descended from Europe, Northern Africa, Southwest Asia, and the Indian subcontinent. So really, in legal terms, Caucasian is a misnomer for all of these things, not just for white people in general.
Why else? We don't exactly know for sure, but one reason I think Caucasian is likely stuck around is because of its power. Language is one of the most systematic, subtle, and significant vehicles for spreading racial ideology.
You mean like you've been doing for this entire video?
And Caucasian implies that white people are different from other racial groups in America. It makes it seem like white people are somehow connected in a way that's not just based on the pigmentation of their skin.
Let's go back to that gene map. Do you notice anything about the African continent compared to the European continent? It's that the African continent has more genetic haplogroups to be found on it than the European continent, particularly with regard to sub-Saharan Africa, which is the region we commonly define as Black Africa. So, if white people have nothing connecting them together except for skin color, then black people have even less connecting each other together because there's even more variation there.
It even sounds kind of scientific, even though it's really not.
Are you trying to imply that you've been scientific in making this video? Because you haven't. At all.
So were you surprised by the history of the word Caucasian?
I sure wasn't surprised by the way you explained it.